For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
I have amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 122, printed in House Report number 115-217, offered by Ms. Tenney of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 440, the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Tenney, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from New York.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My constituents are discouraged. They're fed up with political elites who have failed to represent them and with special interest groups who too often put impractical dogma before practical policy. In the Rust Belt region I represent in upstate New York, the impact of this has been devastating. Devastating job losses, economic stagnation, and the massive outmigration of people and jobs, the largest in the nation. In my district, Mr. Chairman, decline has bred despair, which has spurred a host of other problems. In light of all this, I was elected to Congress with a strong mission to reverse the tide and to revitalize our upstate communities to the greatness and innovation they once experienced. I'm the voice for my constituents who have been left behind, and I'm fighting to bring my district back on path toward individual prosperity and economic revival. Mr. Chairman, my amendment uniquely achieves both. There's nothing new or groundbreaking about my amendment. Simply put, it reinstates the sourcing provision for stainless steel flatware that was in law for 30 years without issue. My amendment adds stainless steel flatware back into the Berry Amendment. For 30 years, American-made flatware was covered under Berry. However, the provision was removed in 2006 after Oneida Limited, the only Berry-compliant manufacturer, ceased domestic operations. In the void left by Oneida's departure came Sherrill Manufacturing, a company in my district that since 2008 has produced 100% American-made flatware. And since 2008, Sherrill has been among the top providers of flatware to the Department of Defense and GSA, fulfilling more than $6.8 million in federal contracts over an 8-year period. All these products are being produced in the formerly closed factory using refurbished Oneida Limited equipment and also providing jobs for many of the same employees who lost their jobs from Oneida's closure after decades of service to that same closed factory. In fact, GSA has repeatedly found Sherrill's flatware to be offered at fair and reasonable prices, which is why the agency already purchases flatware from Sherrill independent of any domestic sourcing requirement. Some domestic resourcing requirements may raise costs. No evidence has been submitted to support the claim that my amendment will do that. This alone should allay any concerns that taxpayers would be on the hook for overly expensive flatware should my amendment be adopted. But if it isn't enough, then there's this. My amendment retains all existing waivers under Berry, which means that if Sherrill's flatware becomes too expensive or is of poor quality or insufficient quality, DoD can find other sources. Ultimately, Mr. Chairman, whenever we can create domestic sourcing opportunities that reduce our military's dependence on imported goods and strengthen domestic supply chains without significantly raising procurement costs, we should. And this is what my amendment does. Reinstating the Berry Amendment's domestic sourcing requirement represents a clear continuity in federal procurement policy, not a stark divergence. As I said, this provision was in effect for 30 years. Thus far, there is one Berry-compliant manufacturer that happens to be in my district, and there should not be a problem with that, as we hope many more producers return to the United States where their businesses were founded to provide robust competition. I also support this amendment for the simple reason that it's good policy. It gives a leg up to robust domestic supply chain that spans 5 states while reducing our military's logistical dependence on imports. Moreover, for the 30-year history of the Berry Amendment's flatware provision, there was only ever one domestic producer. Under the Berry Amendment, this is all that is required, and in Sherrill's case, we know it is a producer that has a track record of offering flatware at market rates. Mr. Chairman, in districts like mine across the country that have rusted-out factories that line the landscapes of far too many of my communities, today we have an opportunity to fix this problem and restore the once great Empire State and our nation to the manufacturing strength it once enjoyed. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan measure And I yield my time to my colleague from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski, for some comments.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 25 seconds.
Can I off? Is that all I have left?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment and want to make one thing perfectly clear. American taxpayers want their tax dollars to go to put Americans to work. This amendment means buy American and hire American. So I just want everyone to be clear. We hear a lot about buy American, hire American. This is what this amendment would do, and I urge all my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time.